pregnancy is just a bit of a belly bump, right? You're always making a big deal out of everything. You're a housewife. You should work more. We're out of beer. Go buy 3 boxes. 1 week before the due date, that's what my husband, who hasn't been supportive since the early stages of my pregnancy and has zero awareness as a father, said to me. There's no need for him to be the father of this child anymore. I am a housewife living in LA. I've been married to my husband for 2 years and am currently pregnant. I became a housewife at my husband's strong request after marriage. But I wanted to continue working, so I felt frustrated initially. Do I have to be a housewife? All my friends are working couples. Can't we just share household chores? I work for a major corporation, so people are watching. If people think I'm making my wife work despite earning a high salary, it could affect my promotion. According to my husband, it's unacceptable for his wife to work because of societal expectations. But nowadays, dual-income families are the norm. I can't see how my work would affect his promotion. I couldn't help but think he was worrying too much, but he wasn't receptive at all. Still, I decided to press the issue one last time. But I want to keep working. It should be fine if we don't tell anyone at your company, right? Wouldn't it be embarrassing to introduce you to my family? Well, as long as you do the housework as a housewife, it's fine. Protecting the family is a man's job. Leave it to me. Although I was a bit dissatisfied with his old-fashioned views, I perfectly managed the household chores as a housewife. My husband seemed proud of me and often boasted about me to his colleagues. She's a good wife. She even made some delicious snacks today. You're newlyweds and so in love. You've got such a wonderful wife, work hard to make her happy. Not just the boss, but also his juniors and peers often came over for drinks. So I had many sleepless nights, but as a wife, I supported my husband. Then one day, my pregnancy was discovered. I had always wanted a child, so I cried with joy. It's our long-awaited child. I'm so happy. We're going to be a family of 3, exciting, isn't it? My husband was as delighted as a child. And we spent our days looking forward to the new life about to join us. For a while, I did the household chores as usual, but after a month, morning sickness started. It was my first pregnancy, and I never imagined morning sickness could be this severe. Fortunately, my husband had a day off. Despite his tiredness, I was feeling unwell, so I decided to rely on him that day. Sorry. The morning sickness is making me feel heavy and lethargic. Could you please help with the basic chores today? Simple food is fine for dinner. What? You're joking, right? What? Are you serious? You're trying to push the housework onto me? No, it's not like that. But today, the morning sickness is terrible. That's just an excuse. Morning sickness isn't a reason to skip household chores, right? I work hard every day to earn money. Housework is not my job. But, still, I hate people who don't fulfill their responsibilities. You think making excuses is enough? Besides, ordering food costs money, so cook properly, okay? My husband insisted that I do the household chores as usual, despite my severe morning sickness. I understand that men can't experience pregnancy and might not grasp the difficulty of morning sickness, just like they can't experience menstruation. However, it makes no sense to me that he denies my suffering. A quick search online would show him how tough morning sickness can be. Despite this, my husband's attitude remained unchanged. As I lay down, stunned by his lack of understanding, he approached me with an annoyed expression. How long are you going to pretend to be sick and rest? I have a drinking party at home planned for today, and my boss is coming, so get ready. I was speechless at his insensitivity. What does he think of me, a pregnant woman? However, he did invite his boss over, and I had to entertain them, barely able to stand. Even as my pregnancy reached 9 months, my husband did not offer me any support. His attitude remained the same as before I was pregnant. Then came the new year. And it was decided that we would spend it at my husband's family home with all the relatives. I wanted to go to my own family home, but my husband wouldn't allow it. Don't you have any better clothes? All the relatives are coming. It's embarrassing to wear something like that. But, with my belly this big, anything tighter than oversized clothes is uncomfortable. He looked at me as if I were something filthy. Sure, I might not look my best, but that's how it is when you're pregnant. I had no expectations from him, but even on New Year's Eve, he irritated me. After a 3-hour train ride, we finally arrived at my in-laws' house. All right, let's toast to the last day of the year. He started drinking merrily with the relatives who had already arrived. My in-laws and other relatives were considerate of my pregnancy. But my husband just kept drinking. I didn't join them but rested in a room prepared by my in-laws. Then, hey. What are you doing here? Everyone is in the living room and you're sleeping here alone. That's out of line. What can I say? I can't drink, and I'm really tired from traveling today. I don't want to hear such excuses. Well, fine. If you're just lying around here, you must be free, right? We've run out of beer, so go buy some. What? Just 3 boxes? Hurry up, will you? Got it. I was shocked that he would say such a thing, even though he was drunk. Everyone in the living room seemed to be enjoying their drinks. And it didn't feel right to ask anyone else to go. Reluctantly, I had no choice but to obey my husband's demand, rather than his order. I sighed and said, I'll go buy it right now. Then my husband returned to the living room, and I immediately left the house. Where are you going? It's quite late already. Just a quick shopping trip. I'll be fine. My father-in-law seemed worried about me going shopping at such a late hour. But I hurried outside, not wanting to hear any more from my husband. The thought of getting scolded by my husband made me hurry. And I started to jog towards the store to buy beer. Maybe that was a mistake. Just 5 minutes after leaving the house, I was suddenly hit by labor pains and collapsed right there. I suffered alone in excruciating pain. I couldn't even cry out because of the pain. And since everyone was in the living room, no one noticed me. Lying on the dark street, I was close to losing consciousness. It wasn't just the pain that was overwhelming. I was also panicking at the thought of being left outside in the cold, unnoticed by anyone. But after about 10 minutes, I saw my father-in-law running towards me. Hey. Are you okay? I was worried. It's dark, and you're pregnant. He quickly understood my situation and called an ambulance. As my consciousness started to clear a bit from the relief of his arrival, I managed to say, labor pains. Don't worry, the ambulance is on its way. I'll go call my son right away. No, it's okay. Please don't tell my husband. As I said that, my consciousness began to fade again. But soon the ambulance arrived, and I was taken to the hospital. I safely gave birth to a baby boy. He was born a week earlier than expected, but the baby was very healthy. And I was moved to tears of joy and relief. However, the only people waiting outside my hospital room were my father-in-law and mother-in-law. I'm sorry for making you come out here. That's okay, but was the baby born safely? Yes. A very healthy boy. Thank you so much. You were barely conscious. We were so worried. It was the same with my wife's labor pains, too severe. It reminded me of that time. But, about your husband. Are you sure we shouldn't call him? You said not to call him, even with your last strength. We thought there must be a reason, so we haven't called. Yes, that's right. My in-laws were quite concerned about why I didn't want my husband called. They must have found it strange, but I had my reasons. My husband was drunk as usual, and while he was initially very excited about the baby, that changed recently. At the beginning of the pregnancy, he was looking forward to the baby. We were both overjoyed, but it changed after about a month. That was when my morning sickness started. He said my morning sickness was just an excuse, a way to slack off. What? Saying morning sickness is an excuse. He can say such terrible things because he's never experienced it. I'm sorry. Even as my belly grew and I gained a bit of weight. He said I was exaggerating and that, as a housewife, I should fulfill my household duties. He hardly supported me as a pregnant woman. I thought about going back to my parents' house, but he said, "Who will do the housework if you're not here?" So I couldn't leave. That's why. I wanted to test him a bit. Testing? I went out for the errand because my husband asked me to buy beer, and I wondered. If I didn't come back without saying anything, would he worry about me? The due date is near. He should know that. That's what came to my mind in that situation. What? My foolish son asked you to go out for an errand. On this cold winter night. You should be resting at this stage of your pregnancy. What was he thinking? I thought something was odd. We told our son not to come home because you're pregnant. Really? I didn't know that. We thought you'd be uncomfortable in such a noisy environment. And you're already in your 10th month of pregnancy. Plus, it's quite a long trip to our house. Even if you came by taxi, it would be quite taxing on you. No. I didn't come by taxi. I took the train because a taxi would be too expensive. That foolish son of mine. I'm truly sorry. I apologize too. I'm sorry. So, has that foolish son of ours contacted you? Actually, I checked a while ago, but there's been no contact from him. Understood. Can you leave the rest to us? It's our responsibility as his parents too. We'll make sure he takes responsibility. For now, I'd like to stay and talk some more, if that's okay? Yes, of course. After that, my father-in-law returned to the family home. And my mother-in-law continued to listen to me. I hadn't told my parents about the emotional abuse from my husband and, of course, hadn't mentioned it to my in-laws either. As I had kept it all bottled up inside, the more I talked, the more I felt like pouring my heart out. The next morning, both sets of parents came to my hospital room. Congratulations on the birth. You did well. Thank you, Mom. We went to see the baby and chatted about everyday things. When we returned to the hospital room, my usually quiet father-in-law spoke up. Is it time? Yes. Please go ahead. With that, my father-in-law briefly left the room and then came back in. Behind him was my husband, his face swollen. Congratulations on the birth. Now I'm a father too. I have to step up. The moment he said that, my father-in-law slapped him without hesitation. My husband stood there, shocked, as silence fell over the room. Then, breaking the silence, my father-in-law began to speak. Don't you have something to say before that? I'm sorry for what I've done until now. I didn't mean to bully you. I just didn't know being pregnant was that hard. How many times do I have to tell you not to make such excuses? This foolish son of mine. My father-in-law's face turned red with anger as soon as my husband started speaking. He looked like a strict father from an old era. I was the same, and so was your father. Supporting your wife as a pregnant woman and as your spouse is a given, isn't it? Can't you even do the basics expected of a husband? When you came to ask for our daughter's hand in marriage, you said, "I work at a big corporation, so leave her to me." Do you think earning money excuses everything? No, that's not what I mean. That's exactly what you've been doing. Don't you even realize it? During this time, my parents were giving my husband cold stares. Eventually, they reached their limit and began yelling at him too. For about 30 minutes, my husband was scolded by all four, including my mother-in-law. Finally, my husband was kicked out of the hospital room by my father-in-law. Actually, after he got home yesterday, he asked our son about you. He said something like, "Maybe she's hungry and went to a store?" That's when he got a beating from his father. Is that so? This isn't something that can be forgiven easily, but he'll be held responsible. After saying this to me, my mother-in-law apologized again and left the hospital room with my parents. I had informed her of my parents' visit, but I never expected it to turn into such a dramatic scene. After staying in the hospital for 5 days, I was discharged and went straight to my parents' house. As requested by my in-laws, I left the baby with my parents and went to my husband's family home. Sorry for troubling you to come here. No, it's okay. I am really sorry. It seems like the bruises on your face have increased. Or is it just me? I didn't do that. It was my brothers and other relatives. Turns out brothers raised in the same environment are alike. He got a good beating from them. I felt relieved hearing that my husband had been taken to task by his relatives over the past 5 days. Well, that proves who was really in the wrong. I'm truly sorry from the bottom of my heart. So, can you forgive me? What? I've reflected these past 5 days. I'll be a proper husband and father from now on, please forgive me. A husband and father? Can you not joke about this? What? I'm going to divorce you and I have no intention of letting you see our son. As I said this, my husband's face fell in shock. I had already decided this the day after I gave birth, and my in-laws knew about it. I wouldn't let my son be raised by such a worthless person. I'll be demanding compensation for the emotional abuse and make sure you pay child support. And I'll be letting the people at the company where I used to work know about this. So don't worry. What? No. Don't make decisions on your own. We're not getting a divorce, right? And what do you mean, letting the company people know? Don't do anything strange. But you often brought them home for drinks. And they were happy for us when they found out about my pregnancy. I can't just get divorced and act like nothing happened, can I? You're going to ruin my reputation. What are you saying at this point? It's all your responsibility. I raised him as my only son with all my effort. But I never imagined he would become such a garbage-like person in society. Maybe he should live his life full of regrets. No way, that can't be true. And you're talking about divorce. What about the child? I haven't even held him yet. You expect to act like a father without having supported me during pregnancy and childbirth? What you did was just make a child irresponsibly. Can you not pretend to be a father? But that's all from me for now. Could you please take care of the rest? Thanks for coming all this way. While my husband was overwhelmed with despair, even hyperventilating a bit, I ignored him and went back to my parents' house. I sent a completed divorce form to my in-laws, and my father-in-law made my husband submit it. My ex-husband ended up moving back to his parents' house, under their supervision for a while. My in-laws covered the part of the compensation and child support that he couldn't pay. And they will keep an eye on him until he finishes paying. I've confirmed the transfer of the compensation and child support. Thank you for everything to the end. We troubled you till the end. I'm truly sorry. From now on, we'll make sure our foolish son thoroughly reflects on his actions. His salary will go towards repaying me, and he won't have any free time. I think he'll learn his lesson. I see. Thank you. Even after the divorce, my in-laws remained on my side and planned to strictly discipline my ex-husband. My ex-husband contacted me wanting to see our son just once, but I ignored it. I have no intention of letting my son meet him until he is an adult and decides to do so on his own. Also, as I had been on friendly terms with my ex-husband's boss and had his contact information, I confessed everything about the recent turmoil. As a result, my ex-husband's reputation at work plummeted, and it seems he's struggling both in his personal and professional life. As for me, I'm living with my parents for now, enjoying my days with my son with their support. Being a single mother will surely bring many challenges, but I'm determined to overcome them. Any hardship feels bearable compared to living with such an ex-husband.
A useless person who doesn't do housework or cook deserves a divorce. I'm going to demand $55,300 in damages.
Looking down at me, bedridden and sick, John suddenly declared that. Divorce? Just when he came home suddenly? What do you mean by useless for not doing any housework or cooking and demanding $55,300 in damages? Is he out of his mind? Despite the fact that the stress from John made me ill. I was boiling with rage at his outrageous treatment, but I couldn't move as I wanted, and couldn't even get up. I thought, I didn't want to let things go as John wished. With that, I forced a smile while lying down. Fine by me. John's face was filled with astonishment, not expecting me to agree to the divorce so easily. There's no turning back now. I'll make him regret all he's done to belittle me. My name is Emily. I work at an IT company called Lyrax, and I'm turning 38 this year. Though I mostly work from home, my days are incredibly busy yet fulfilling. It's often tough, but the work is rewarding too. My classmates from school are often amazed at how hard I work, but they respect me for it, which feels great. 2 years ago, I started a family. I married John, my husband. I met John 4 years ago at a pub in a bustling district, after dinner with a friend. After dinner, as we were walking to the station, someone called out from behind.
Excuse me.
I turned around to see who it was. A man dressed in a shirt and jacket, looked like a capable businessman. He said,
You left this at the restaurant.
And handed me my smartphone, which I had forgotten. Thank you so much for bringing it to me.
No problem. I'm glad I made it in time. Would you like to grab a drink now?
The man, relieved to have returned my phone, then surprisingly invited me for a drink. Shocked, I glanced at my friend, about to part ways at the station. My friend encouraged me to go with a smile. If you don't mind, then yes. That day, I had made a mistake at work, which was unusual for me, and had a lot to get off my chest. My friend had to meet someone, so it was perfect timing that he approached me. After parting with my friend, I went to a nearby bar with a man. That man is now my husband, John. At the bar, John and I vented about work and quickly hit it off. By the time we left, we felt as comfortable as best friends, and he asked for my contact. So we began to communicate, started dating, and married 2 years later. It was a surprisingly smooth progression, even surprising to myself. It was a late marriage, but lucky for me, who was always focused on work. That's what I thought at the time.
Emily, could you get me a beer?
While relaxing on the sofa messing with his phone, John asked me this, making me sigh again. How many times has it been? I've lost count. 2 years into our marriage, John's sloppiness was too much. John, who works at a well-known megabank, always boasts about being an elite banker, claiming that those who work are the most important. Before marriage, I had no idea he thought so highly of himself. I understood he was proud of his work, but hearing him constantly assert it was exhausting. Enough, I'm busy. Buy it yourself. As I was working, I couldn't run errands for John and brushed off his request. Then John scratched his head in annoyance and said,
How can you be busy with remote work? I was slaving away at the office all day and I'm exhausted.
Remote work isn't always easy. Even when I said that, he retorted with sarcasm.
Yeah, right, as if. You can take breaks anytime you want.
I grew weary of arguing back, silently stood up from the chair, and reluctantly went out to shop. Here's your beer, I bought it. John, without thanking me for running the errand or even paying for the beer, silently took it and immersed himself in his smartphone again. This felt less like a marriage and more like a master and slave relationship. I wondered why John even married me. Why did I marry John? I sighed to myself. Not to mention he never helps with the housework despite both of us working. I once suggested sharing household chores, to which he scoffed.
Share housework? Huh, don't joke. You're always home, it's only natural for you to do it.
But I do go to the office sometimes. I can't always do all the chores.
You only go occasionally, right? Just hire a maid for those days. Huh.
John was adamantly against doing any housework, never agreeing to it. He usually mocks me, saying,
You have it easy with your job.
Or,
Hurry up with the chores.
But at night he would frequently demand physical intimacy. However, there was no sign of us having children. If there was a reason, it was probably on my side. I knew that it became harder for women to conceive in their late 30s. I thought if we don't have children, we should just enjoy our married life, but John seemed dissatisfied. He disdainfully said,
You can't even have kids. You're really useless.
I was infuriated. He was of no help around the house himself. I doubted whether he was really so efficient at work. A truly capable person would manage their personal affairs well and easily handle housework. I had my doubts about John's work performance. Speaking of doubts, for several months, John's return home had been noticeably late. I didn't understand the busy periods at a bank, but when I mentioned, You've been busy lately, he only replied,
Unlike you, my work is tough.
When he continued to come home after midnight for months, even I, who was not quick to suspect, found it suspicious. It was only natural to suspect infidelity. One day, as usual, John came home late at night and collapsed at the entrance. Approaching to see what was wrong, he seemed very drunk and unable to stand, his eyes closed, nearly losing consciousness. I sighed and approached to untie his necktie when John mumbled something.
Wait for me, Rose. Just a little longer, okay?
I was startled to hear my husband whisper in a sweet, melting voice, Rose? Who's that? I couldn't tell if it was a drunken slip or sleep talk, but John started snoring and fell asleep as is. Growing suspicious, I installed many cameras throughout the house. Next week, I'll be away on a business trip for 2 days, leaving the house empty. If John is cheating, my absence would be the perfect opportunity for him to bring his lover home. While there's no certainty he'll bring someone home, if he does, I'll have evidence to confront him. With that thought, I installed the cameras. A week later, pretending nothing was amiss, I told John, Well then, I'm off on my trip. He waved a goodbye with a smile. He had a huge smile on his face, which infuriated me. Returning from the trip 2 days later, I immediately checked the camera footage. As expected, there was John with his lover, intimately engaged. Feeling nauseous, I couldn't watch the whole footage, but it was clear evidence of his infidelity. Clenching my fist as if to crush the camera, I was filled with rage. Unforgivable. The extent of his mockery was beyond belief. Does he think he can do this and get away with it? Confirming John's infidelity filled me with anger and sorrow. His constant berating like,
The meal's awful.
Or,
The floor's dirty.
only added to my stress. I pondered when to bring up divorce, but lost the right moment due to a sudden increase in work. Eventually juggling work and household chores, my body couldn't keep up. One day I suddenly collapsed with a high fever. I had to take the day off from work. Of course, I couldn't do any housework either. John knew I was sick from the morning, but left silently for work and returned around 6 in the evening. It was much earlier than usual. He then came to where I was bedridden. The smell of alcohol hit my nose, making me feel sick. Without a care for my condition, John glared.
A useless person who doesn't do housework or cook deserves a divorce. I'm going to demand $55,300 in damages.
Looking down at me bedridden, John suddenly declared that. Divorce? He just came home and started saying this so suddenly? What does he mean by useless for not doing any housework or cooking? And $55,300 in damages? Is he insane? All because of the stress from him, I got sick. I was boiling with anger at his outrageous treatment, but unable to move as I wished, I couldn't even get up. I refused to let things go as John wished. With that resolve, I forced a smile while lying down. Fine by me. Surprised by my easy acceptance of divorce, astonishment spread across John's face. There was no turning back now. I was determined to make him regret what he had done. A few days later, when I fully recovered, the first thing I did was to get documents related to divorce agreement. After signing my part of the divorce agreement, I waited for John's return.
I'm home.
That day, John returned around 10 p.m., reeking of alcohol. He also smelled of a perfume I had never noticed before. As usual, I confronted him with the divorce papers. I want a divorce. In a low voice, I said that, and John snatched the divorce papers with a
Finally free.
Whether it was sarcasm towards me or himself, John smirked. He could have filed for divorce himself if he wanted it so badly, but it seemed he wanted me to initiate it. I was fed up with his attitude.
I'll claim the damages.
Pathetic that John thought he could claim damages after cheating. I silently watched the divorce proceedings unfold without saying anything. The next day, I submitted the divorce agreement, successfully ending my life as John's slave. The end of our marriage felt anticlimactic, but just divorcing John wasn't enough for me to forgive him. I decided to take action to make John regret his own actions. Over a few days, I packed up all my belongings in the house. I decided to leave this house. This was a second-hand apartment we bought when we got married 2 years ago, but I wasn't too attached to it, so I easily chose to leave.
Don't ever come back here.
As I packed my things, John watched with a delightful laugh. He probably plans to live here with his lover once I'm gone. The whole idea is nauseating, but from the footage of the hidden camera, it seems John is quite infatuated with his lover. Ignoring John's words, I left the house with my suitcase. Phew, at least now I can escape John's verbal abuse. I sighed with relief. Then I headed straight to a real estate agency and asked for a rental property I could move into immediately. I found a somewhat small, reasonably priced, well-maintained apartment. I quickly signed the lease for the apartment. I'll move in a week, so I'll live in a hotel for a while, which should be fine. After that, I completed some banking procedures and checked into a hotel. I've been planning my revenge on John the whole time, and when I thought of my plan, I got goosebumps. Yes, this is it. There's no other way. Imagining John's shocked face made me almost burst into laughter. Just watch. He won't get away with this so easily. The next day, I immediately set my plan in motion. I felt satisfied after doing something so bold. Life then went on peacefully. Being single again was so much easier without having to cook or do laundry for John. I even regretted not divorcing him earlier. A month later, while enjoying my single life and focusing on work, I received a late-night call. Woken up by the ringtone, I checked the screen, and it was John. I initially ignored it, but he kept calling. I thought it would disrupt my sleep, so I reluctantly answered. Hello? I answered groggily, and I could hear cars and trains in the background on the other end. It seemed he was outside. Annoyed by being woken up and hearing the noise, I waited for John's response.
Emily, you finally answered. What's this about?
John's shouting rang in my ears, instantly waking me up. I knew what he was about to say, but pretended to be clueless, asking, "What are you talking about?"
Don't play dumb. I got a call from the bank yesterday. They suddenly fired me. I'm on my honeymoon in Italy, and this makes no sense.
Honeymoon, huh? Italy would mean a significant time difference. It must still be evening where John is. That's why he called at this hour. Typical of John to not consider my situation. That sounds serious. Good luck with that. Bye. I gave a typical response and was about to hang up, but John shouted,
Hey, wait!
So I sighed and stopped.
I asked why I was fired. Guess what they said? You lost us a major client. Guess which company? Lyrex Corporation, which is the company where you work at.
John explained how he got fired, but I had expected this. After all, I orchestrated everything. In the dim light, I closed my eyes and calmed myself. If I was to exact revenge on John for everything, now was the time. Taking a deep breath, I said, "Yes, I know, because I was the one who withdrew our business dealings with your bank." Over the phone, John exclaimed in disbelief.
Huh?
Next to him, I could hear a woman's cooing voice asking, "Are you still on the phone?" I continued, unbothered. "You might not have known, but I am the CEO of Lyrex Corporation."
The CEO?
Yes, I'm the CEO. John thought I was just a regular office worker doing remote work, but in reality, I'm the president who rarely needs to be on site. I left the company I joined as a new graduate after about 3 years and successfully started my own, which I've been running for over a decade. The company grew successfully, and we were able to receive substantial loans from banks. The bank where John worked was the one we had always been dealing with. After separating from John, I decided to repay all the loans we had taken from the bank. The sales representative was taken aback. They would lose the interest they were expecting to receive. The lump sum repayment was an unexpected turn for the bank.
Could you please reconsider?
The sales representative asked me hastily. I replied, "I have one condition. Fire John." The salesperson was flustered and brought their supervisor. The supervisor, who I knew from before as they used to handle Lyrex Corporation's account, asked me what happened.
What suddenly brought this on?
I decided to tell the supervisor everything. Actually, your employee John was having an affair with the daughter of your bank's president. He ridiculed me, refused to pay alimony, and now he's about to remarry that young lady. I couldn't stand it. I learned about John's affair with the president's daughter through the footage from the hidden camera at home. The camera also picked up their conversations, so I knew everything they talked about. Both the salesman and the supervisor turned pale upon hearing my story, trying to maintain business dealings with my company. Probably the story reached the president, who got angry knowing his daughter was involved with a married man. They promised to fire John, so I decided against the lump sum repayment. That's why I still have dealings with John's bank. I knew about John's firing before he even called me. Huh? You're the one being unfair. You pushed all the housework onto me, ridiculed me, and even cheated. And now you're saying I'm the bad one? You can't even think logically. You called yourself an elite employee? Ridiculous. I will definitely demand damages from you. To think you believed you could get damages after cheating? And by the way, I changed the name on the mortgage for the house I was paying for. It's your responsibility now. I unleashed all the stress I had endured onto John over the phone.
What?
John was speechless at my straightforward truth. But then I heard a weaker voice than before.
Please, forgive me. Spare me the damages. And the mortgage too. Rose is pregnant. We can't imagine being in debt with a baby on the way. I've lost my job and don't know what to do. Please, let this slide. Please.
Hearing my pathetic ex-husband beg, I could only sigh. I couldn't believe I endured 2 years with such a man. Forgive? There's nothing to forgive. I want nothing to do with you ever again. Damages are a severance fee. This is all your fault, isn't it? Why should I have to endure any more? I'm done talking to you. You might as well keep running away in a foreign land. Goodbye. Ignoring John's plea to wait, I hung up the phone. He should be grateful I even answered at this late hour. With a sigh, I returned to bed. I probably won't talk to John again. The thought of leading a life unrelated to John brought a sense of relief. Later, my lawyer demanded alimony from John and his mistress after they returned from their overseas trip. John had apparently spent a fortune on the woman and was practically penniless. The mistress, a president's daughter, was scolded and disowned by her father due to this incident. Unable to access her family's wealth, John and his mistress were left with no choice but to go into debt. Even though John claimed to be an elite banker, I heard that he often skipped work, leading to poor sales performance. For his company, this incident served as a perfect reason to fire him. Now John and his mistress are barely getting by with part-time jobs. The woman being pregnant will soon be unable to work. I doubt John can support 3 people on his own. I think they should experience some hardship. Meanwhile, my business is thriving and I've expanded our operations. With a larger loan from the bank John used to work at, my salary has increased. I'm planning to buy my own house, fulfilling my longtime dream of owning a home. Although I lost a husband, I have supportive colleagues and business partners. I'm grateful for my fortunate circumstances and continue to dedicate myself to my work.
I'll divorce the barren good-for-nothing and remarry a young and pretty woman. Just after I had my ovaries removed, Steve suddenly stood up from his chair, interrupting the doctor's explanation, and burst into loud laughter. Both the doctor and I were shocked and looked up at Steve. I already have a cute girl. I'll have her give birth. Saying that, Steve took out divorce papers from his bag. Apparently, he had prepared them ever since I was first diagnosed. Hearing this, I felt ridiculous. I understand. Glad you're reasonable. Steve, saying this, sat back down and urged the doctor to continue the conversation. The doctor glanced at me and then began to speak. Actually. What? At the doctor's shocking revelation, Steve's face turned pale. Looking at Steve like that, I shouted in my heart, "Serves you right. My name is Vanessa Simon. I'm a 35-year-old housewife. I used to work as an office clerk, but I quit when I got married. As a housewife, I do household chores and also sell crafts I make as a hobby online. I met Steve, my husband, at work. We got to know each other at a workplace where there were many drinking parties. I took care of Steve when he got drunk at a year-end party. That was the start. After that, he invited me out for a meal as thanks, and we went out together several times. One day, he confessed his feelings, and we started dating. Steve, being in sales, was a smooth talker. Being with Steve always made me smile, and he cheered me up even when times were tough. So, when he proposed, I happily accepted. Preparing for the wedding was hard, but I was happy. Steve's family consisted of his parents, his brother, and himself. His father was a very nice person, and every time we met, he gave me my favorite sweets and money for meals with Steve. I've only met Steve's brother, Jack, once, but he was a very kind person. His brother's wife seemed very polite too, and I wanted to get along with her. On the other hand, Steve's mother clearly expressed her dislike for me. The exact opposite of his father and brother. Every time we met, she glared at me and made snide remarks. Naturally, I couldn't bring myself to like her and tried to avoid meeting her as much as possible. However, Steve seemed displeased with my attitude and kept trying to bring me together with his mother after we got married. I told him I didn't like it, but Steve would get angry and shout, "Are you disregarding my mother?" I kept thinking of reasons, like wanting to spend anniversaries just with him, to avoid meeting his mother. Then one day, when Steve and I went out to eat, his mother was waiting in front of the restaurant. I turned pale and looked at Steve. "You invited your mother. I thought you'd be happy. Didn't I say I wanted to spend it just with you?" That day was my birthday, and I insisted to Steve. He looked down at me with an annoyed expression. "How long are you going to be stubborn? My mom is trying to get along. Aren't you being a bit presumptuous for a wife?" I felt like I had been hit on the head with a blunt object at Steve's words. To think he had always felt that way. Just the thought brought tears to my eyes. "Don't cry." What a hassle. It's terrible. I was looking forward to it. "So are you telling me to send Mom away right now?" Steve, becoming infuriated, began to shout. It was clear that unless I backed down, this wouldn't end. I couldn't stand the stares from passers-by anymore. Enough already. It's my fault. Right? As long as you understand. Come on, my mom is waiting. Satisfied with my obedient attitude, Steve had a pleased look on his face. Then, somewhat forcibly, he took my hand and led me to his mother. What followed was terrible. I was made to sit next to my mother-in-law and had to listen endlessly to her complaints about every single dish. And every time I ate, she would smirk and speak. Vanessa, you seem a bit poorly raised. You don't know manners, do you? What did I do wrong? Every time she commented, I asked, but my mother-in-law just smirked and never explained. Steve did the same, just smirking and laughing. Steve, what am I doing wrong? Huh? You don't even know? That's why you're getting criticized. With every mocking comment, my heart shrank and I felt like crying. My much-anticipated birthday was ruined. I desperately stuffed the tasteless French meal into my stomach. The candles on the cake the restaurant had prepared were blown out by my mother-in-law. And she took center stage, making it seem like it was her birthday. The situation didn't change until we left, and I ended up having the worst birthday. Unable to calm down, I confronted Steve when we got home, but he frowned. You dare say it wasn't fun, even though my mom came especially for you. But, it was mostly your mother who. How ungrateful, for just a wife. Steve said and started shouting again. It continued until the date changed, and Steve didn't calm down until the early morning. I'm going to sleep. Make sure the house is clean. With that, Steve unilaterally ended the conversation and went to the bedroom alone. Left alone, I did the housework, completely exhausted. Since becoming a housewife, Steve never did any household chores. Whenever I asked for help, he would look annoyed and retort, "You're just a housewife." By the time we had been married for 3 years, I stopped asking. And it was settled that Steve worked and I did the housework. Hey, I want a child soon. Yes. You still can't have one? What? I was puzzled by the way Steve phrased it. Our physical relationship was bland but regular. But the way he said it made it sound like it was my fault we didn't have children. Do you think it's my fault we can't have children? What else could it be? I felt anger at Steve's blunt response. Since deciding to marry Steve, I had undergone a bridal check and there were no problems. This meant that the reason we couldn't have children might be due to Steve. I mentioned this, and the next moment, I found myself on the floor. You. Don't joke. It's obviously your fault. Steve's thunderous voice echoed in the living room. I looked up at Steve, holding my stinging cheek. You can't get pregnant and you blame your husband. What a terrible wife. I'll have my mom scold you too. Be prepared. Then Steve made a call to his mother in front of me. It seems she will come to our house soon. Steve looked down at me, smirking. Hold on. What do you mean it's my son's fault? And after being supported by him, how dare you say such a thing? As soon as my mother-in-law entered our house, she slapped me across the face. The cheek opposite to the one Steve had hit was stinging and tears welled up in my eyes. Really, a woman who can't admit her own faults should be returned. Unable to have children, what a defective product. Furious at her harsh words, I glared back at my mother-in-law. Then, with a shrill voice, she started yelling at me. How dare you? Fine. Let's get you tested. Once we find the cause, we'll get compensation and get you divorced. So be prepared for that. Understood. I nodded to my mother-in-law's words. Steve seemed a bit unhappy, but was persuaded by his mother to accept the tests. We then made an appointment at the nearest university hospital. On the day of the test, my mother-in-law barged into our house. It seems she intended to accompany us to the infertility tests and hear the results herself. Steve, looking somewhat displeased, accepted her accompanying us. Upon arriving at the hospital, Steve and I were directed to different areas for the tests. I had been declared normal in a bridal check, so I was confident about this test too. The result couldn't be anything but normal. That's what I thought until the doctor's words made my eyes widen. There's a tumor. We need to operate immediately. What? While listening to the bland explanation of the surgery, my world turned dark. Beside me, my mother-in-law listened intently, but her mouth corners were upturned, showing no sign of concern. Doctor, so does this mean my daughter-in-law can't have children anymore? No, we'll just remove one ovary, so it's still possible for her to get pregnant. However, the chances of natural pregnancy will decrease by about 30%. My mother-in-law exaggerated her surprise at this explanation. Then, glancing at me, she sighed. I was looking forward to a grandchild, what a pity. But, the surgery comes first. Yes, let's start the surgery immediately. I faced the surgery, unable to comprehend the situation fully. When Steve heard the explanation from his mother, he said, see, it's not my fault, and left to drink without even waiting for his results. The thought of my husband going to drink on the day of my surgery, without a word of worry, because the success rate was high, was too much. I was convinced that Steve no longer loved me. Perhaps it wasn't as painful because I had somewhat sensed it all along. I faced the surgery alone. The operation went smoothly and was successful. The wound hurt, but otherwise, there seemed to be no issues. While alone in the hospital, I received a message from Steve. It only mentioned that chores were piling up at home and to not forget to apply for the insurance. The absence of even a simple "Are you okay?" in that message made me feel my affection for Steve disappearing. Then, during a post-surgery checkup, the doctor told me a surprising fact. The doctor had tried to inform Steve about his test results, but he had left without listening. I requested the doctor not to tell Steve for now, and to share the information during a checkup before my discharge, with Steve present. The doctor agreed to my request and kept it from Steve in the meantime. There was no contact from Steve, nor any word from my mother-in-law. Despite the ominous atmosphere, I spent a quiet and peaceful time in the hospital. I sent a message to Steve, asking him to come only on the last day. Then came the day of discharge and the checkup. Steve, unusually, came early in the morning and helped with my discharge preparations, charming the nurses. Thank you. Well, it's the last time, after all. The phrase, the last time, caught my attention, but since Steve didn't elaborate, I decided it must have been a misunderstanding and didn't press further. When all preparations were complete, Steve and I were escorted by a nurse to the doctor's office, where the doctor was waiting. Ms. Vanessa Simon, there were no abnormalities. Congratulations on your discharge. Thank you, doctor. I thanked the doctor. I could see Steve thanking him beside me. Just as we sat down on the chairs, the doctor was about to speak to Steve. I'm divorcing the barren woman and remarrying a young and pretty girl. Just after I had my ovaries removed, Steve suddenly stood up from his chair, interrupting the doctor's explanation, and burst into loud laughter. Both the doctor and I were shocked and looked up at Steve. I already have a cute girl. I'll have her give birth. Saying that, Steve took out divorce papers from his bag. Apparently, he had prepared them ever since I was first diagnosed. Hearing this, I felt ridiculous. I understand. Glad you're reasonable. Steve said and sat down, urging the doctor to continue. The doctor glanced at me and then began to speak. Actually. What? Steve's face turned pale at the doctor's shocking statement. I looked at Steve and screamed in my mind, "Serves you right." Steve, unable to grasp the situation, was trembling and pale. I sat beside him with a calm expression. "What do you mean I'm infertile?" It's clear that Steve has no viable sperm. Not only natural conception is impossible, but fertility treatments offer no hope either. Lies. Steve shouted and then grabbed my shoulders, turning to yell at me in pain. "You set this up, didn't you? Because I said divorce, this is your revenge?" I responded to Steve with a disbelieving voice. "Why would I need to do such a thing? I didn't even know about the divorce until you mentioned it here." "Is that so?" Steve slumped back into his chair, muttering something. Then, after a while, he asked the doctor a question. "Doctor, is it really 0%? Strictly speaking, it's nearly impossible. Unless a miracle happens, natural conception is out of the question." Steve's face brightened up at those words, and he immediately started smirking. "Sorry, Vanessa. Seems like I've made that miracle happen." "What do you mean?" "My girlfriend, she's pregnant." I was genuinely surprised at Steve's words, and even the doctor's eyes widened. Naturally. We came as a couple for consultation. And one of us was announcing the pregnancy of an affair partner. So, I need the divorce done quickly. I've got to get my registry sorted. Steve, in a cheerful mood, looked as if he might start dancing at any moment. I silently took the divorce papers. I agree to the divorce. But I'll be discussing compensation and property division through a lawyer later. Just so you know. Got it, got it. She's cute, so don't be jealous. I replied to Steve, who was making unnecessary concerns, with exasperation. Then we parted ways at the hospital. I returned home, and Steve went back to his parents' house. As soon as I got home, I started packing. I also decided to check Steve's study. It seemed he didn't bother to hide anything, as I found plenty of evidence. It appears Steve met his mistress at a bar where she was working. He probably started talking to her while she was on shift. When I opened his computer, his messaging app was open, and I could see everything. There were many suspicious photos, and I sent them all to my phone. Normally, seeing loving photos of your husband with someone else would bring tears. But I was so out of love for Steve that I couldn't cry. Instead, I almost laughed. The next day, I printed the conversations and photos from the messaging app and went to a nearby law firm. The female lawyer there was very kind and listened to everything. She even got angry with him and agreed that we should punish Steve hard. I then sent a letter of demand to Steve at his parents' house. The day the letter arrived, I received numerous calls from Steve. Reluctantly, I answered the phone. "Hey. What's this? What do you mean?" "It's a letter of demand." "Not that." "What's this about compensation?" Apparently, he hadn't listened to me clearly at the hospital. I already explained. The compensation is for your infidelity and verbal abuse. But I told you my girlfriend is pregnant. I can't pay compensation. Isn't your girlfriend gone now? Hearing this, Steve gasped. As expected, he was surprised, and I couldn't help but laugh. "You should have told her you're married." I am now registered with her, so it's not cheating. That kind of selfish argument won't fly. Hearing my incredulous response, Steve started shouting in anger. It seems he had never told his mistress that he was married. I was shocked when she called me right after receiving the letter of demand. She had felt something was off with Steve's father's behavior. And Steve's and his mother's words. She hadn't submitted the marriage registration yet. And told me she was planning to leave the house. I had learned another crucial piece of information. But decided to save it for last. I only told Steve about these 2 points. He was speechless upon hearing them. You. If you hadn't interfered, I would be happy by now. No, it's your fault for not telling her. Steve seemed at a loss for words again. I spoke to him with a half smile. Anyway, please make the payment. I think you're going to have a tough time. Hey, do you know where she went? Steve must have been desperate to ask me that. I did receive a call from her, but she didn't tell me where she was going. When I told him that, Steve clicked his tongue. You're useless. That's why you're cheated on and getting divorced. I don't want to be told that by someone being sued for compensation. What? No matter what he said, it didn't affect me. Instead, everything bounced back on Steve, digging his own grave. His pathetic attitude made me laugh uncontrollably. For now, let's talk with a lawyer involved. I also want you to agree on the documents. All right. I understand. Having finally gotten his consent, I hung up the phone. Then, I lay down on the bed. I'm going to be busy from now on. I took a deep breath, thinking about this. 3 days later, my lawyer and I were in front of Steve's parents' house. It looked more run down than the last time I visited. Oh, you're late. Just come in. As soon as she saw us, my mother-in-law glared at us with an unmistakable look of disdain. I'm right on time. Excuse me for coming in. So cheeky. I'm glad you're getting divorced. As if the sound of grinding teeth was almost audible. My mother-in-law led us into the house with a clenched jaw. In the living room, besides Steve, there was his brother, Jack. I wondered why I couldn't see Steve's father. Isn't your father here? At my question, both Steve and his mother made faces as if they had swallowed bitter bugs. Then Jack explained the situation in their place. Actually, Dad was furious with Steve and divorced Mom for defending him. What? I was surprised and looked at my mother-in-law. She avoided my gaze with a sullen face. While glancing at her, Jack continued. He's staying at my place now. He's not feeling well, so I told him to stay home today. He was apologizing for what he's done to you, Vanessa. I can't believe it. Father was always so kind to me. As I said this, Jack smiled and nodded. Then he looked sternly at Steve. Honestly, I didn't even want to come, but with just these two, it wouldn't be a proper conversation. So, I decided to be present. Understanding Jack's reason for being there, I felt it made sense. Given my mother-in-law's reception earlier, I couldn't imagine this discussion going smoothly. It's your fault my husband left, so I should be the one wanting compensation.
Yeah.
Really? My pregnant wife left too. Aren't you like a plague, Vanessa? Hearing this absurd reasoning, Jack, the lawyer, and I looked at each other and burst out laughing. The truth was, my father-in-law left because he was fed up with my mother-in-law defending their son, who had done something outrageous. And Steve's new wife left because he had tricked her into marrying him without telling her he was already married. In other words, both left because of my mother-in-law and Steve's actions. With all due respect, both you, Mother and Steve, are untrustworthy by every act. This entire situation is entirely your fault. How dare you speak like that? You're just a daughter-in-law. Not anymore. What? You're so petty. That's what I hate about you. Is that so? Steve, watching the exchange between his mother and me, looked completely flustered. Was he always this pathetic? I was so disappointed that I felt no pity for him. Steve, speak up for yourself. Steve, stay quiet. I'll handle this. You don't have to pay any compensation, my mother-in-law said, shielding Steve. It's pathetic for a 35-year-old to hide behind his mother. I glared at Steve, who quietly submitted to his mother's words. After all that bluster, you can't say anything in front of your mom? I hated that mama's boy attitude. I'm not a mama's boy. Finally responding, Steve prompted me to drop the bombshell. Did you tell your mother that you're infertile? That's enough about that. That's where it all started. Shut up. Seeing Steve's panicked reaction, I realized he hadn't told his mother. I laid out the medical reports I had brought in front of my mother-in-law. She turned pale as she looked at them. What is this? This is a misunderstanding. It's true that it's difficult for me. But she did get pregnant, so it's not zero possibility. Hearing Steve's words, my mother-in-law sighed with relief and then turned to me with a triumphant look. You're so mistaken. Just because you're barren, don't make Steve impotent too. Are you really sure it was Steve's child she was pregnant with? At my words, my mother-in-law looked stunned for a moment, then glared at me fiercely. I decided to show more evidence to both her and Steve. Here, I have an investigation report. It seems she's been quite active around, and there were multiple men in her history. What? Steve snatched the report, reading it with a pale face. Then, seeing the last part, he slumped down in defeat. There, it was written that while she was dating Steve, she was also seeing another man, whom she married after leaving Steve's family. And the results of a DNA test confirmed that the child was that man's. So, that means I'm impotent? Unfortunately, it seems so. As I pressed the point, Steve burst into tears, clearly devastated by the reality of his impotence. Lies, I won't be deceived. It's impossible for Steve to be impotent. Refusing to believe, my mother-in-law tore up the investigation report. Anticipating this, I presented another copy of the same document. My mother-in-law glared at me resentfully. That's when Jack started laughing. This is hilarious. My brother, who always mocked me, turned out to be impotent. Jack was laughing hysterically at Steve. He then showed his phone to Steve. I'm already the father of 2. I let Dad meet them, but I never told Mom. She was already out of the picture. I have grandchildren? Why didn't you tell me? My mother-in-law leaned forward with shining eyes, but Jack looked at her coldly. Why would I tell you anything? We're estranged, remember? You haven't forgotten what you did to my wife, have you? Jack then explained everything my mother-in-law had done to his wife. His wife, a high school classmate, had been constantly berated by my mother-in-law for being from a single-parent family. After they married, my mother-in-law's remarks only intensified, pressuring her about children and questioning her fertility at every turn. Jack's wife endured for his sake, but confessed everything when she found out she was pregnant. Jack confronted his mother and then moved out, cutting ties with her. Well, she was a bit mentally fragile, so I was just trying to toughen her up. I fell for her kindness. Don't meddle in things you don't understand. Jack's sharp words made my mother-in-law twitch. Even now, she showed no signs of remorse, causing Jack to sigh heavily. I didn't even want to come to Steve's wedding. But Dad said Vanessa was a good person, so I attended. I had no idea such exchanges had taken place. Steve ground his teeth in frustration upon hearing this. I hoped Vanessa might change Steve for the better. But in the end, he just hurt her. I've grown up. I went to a better university than you, and I earn more than you. Steve's triumphant attitude seemed pathetic. Jack looked at him with pity. You have no idea where I work, do you? You went to a third-rate university. It must be some small company. I'm actually the president of this company. Jack said so and handed a business card to Steve. He also handed one to me, and I was surprised when I saw it. I know this company. Are you the president, Jack?
Yeah.
That's right. Jack smiled confidently, while Steve just stared at the business card, frozen. No wonder. Since Jack's company was the one that made the custom-made suits Steve loved to wear. Jack, if you're that rich, you can easily pay Steve's compensation. You're his brother after all, just give it to him. That's a joke. I have no intention of paying a penny. Besides, Vanessa wouldn't be satisfied with that. Of course not. I'll make sure he pays it himself. Hearing this, Steve's shoulders slumped. I smiled at him, and he looked at me with desperate eyes. I was wrong, let's start over, okay? Thank you for everything until now. But there's no way I would reconsider, even if the world turned upside down. But Steve seemed utterly defeated, his head hung low. I placed the compensation agreement in front of him and asked him to agree. Well then, I look forward to the compensation payment. Thank you. As for me, this is
Goodbye.
we won't be meeting again. There was no reply from either my mother-in-law or Steve. Jack and I left them behind as we walked out of their house. A month later, Steve paid the compensation in full. Apparently, my mother-in-law sold some land to come up with the money. The land was where Steve's family house stood. And now my mother-in-law and Steve were living together in an old apartment near their workplace. After selling the land, half of the money went to Steve's father. And my mother-in-law was left with almost nothing after paying the compensation. My mother-in-law was going around telling her friends that I had swindled her out of money. But those who knew her character didn't take her seriously. Steve was later fired from his job due to his unhygienic appearance and increasing tardiness and absences. His work attitude wasn't great to begin with, and without his clean appearance, his pushiness became a liability, and he failed to produce results. After being fired, he's been hopping between part-time jobs but doesn't last long because of his personality. My mother-in-law is also working, but like Steve, she doesn't stick with jobs long, and their life is very tight. Jack and his wife are expecting their third child this year. Their father is looking forward to the grandchild's birth, actively helping Jack's wife and getting involved in their life more than ever. Even going on trips together, building a great relationship. Jack's children are very affectionate and call me Nessie, showing me a lot of love. As for me, I was hired by Jack's company. I've been put in charge of decorations for children's suits in a new project. Thanks to my knack for crafts. It's a responsible and nerve-wracking job, but it's fulfilling and fun. I've also recently started dating a man I met there. He's really kind and gets along well with Jack. They were high school classmates and he's close to Jack's wife too, often joining them for meals at their house. I've explained to him about my ovarian removal and the slightly reduced chance of natural pregnancy. I also told him about the reasons for my divorce. He's been very understanding, saying he doesn't care about that and wants to spend time with me. I feel the same, and lately, our routine on weekends has been enjoying our shared hobbies of reading and crafting either at his place or mine. He's even mentioned wanting to introduce me to his parents soon, which has me nervously working on handcrafted gifts for them right now. Vanessa, can you make the rose decoration? Leave it to me. My days are busy but filled with joy and enthusiasm. I'm looking forward to a happy life filled with things and people I love.
Look what I found yesterday,
He said, bringing home a branded dress for our daughter. It was an ordinary day, not her birthday, Christmas, or anything like that. My husband, Jim, smiles as he handed the dress to our daughter. It was a bit expensive for a gift. I wondered if there was nothing for our son, Sean. As I watched, no present was given to him. Turning my gaze towards my son, I saw him intently watching the exchange between my husband and our daughter. My daughter Anna, only 3 years old, happily reached for the branded dress. She innocently exclaimed, "Yay, pretty!" Concerned about her son, I tried to divert his attention. "Sean, look, your favorite cartoon is on TV," I said, but he kept his eyes fixed on the dress in our daughter's hands. I am Kathy, a 35-year-old housewife. 5 years ago, I divorced my ex and took custody of my 1-year-old son, Sean, and met my current husband, Jim, while figuring out how to live as a single mother. Jim was a regular customer at the diner where I started working part-time right after my divorce. We got close through casual conversations and eventually exchanged phone numbers. Being of the same age, we quickly hit it off. We met up frequently and we both started thinking about marriage. I loved Jim, but my main concern was always Sean. Sean's well-being was my top priority, so even though I was considering marriage, I had my doubts. However, Jim was always kind to Sean. Sean also grew fond of him, which led me to decide on remarriage. I hoped to build a better family life for Sean this time. Our life after remarriage was as happy as I had imagined. Jim remained as kind as before the marriage, and Sean seemed happy to have a father. On days off, we went to the park as a family, playing catch and having fun. My relationship with Jim was good. Shortly after our marriage, we had our daughter, Anna, and started our new life as a family of 4. It was a peaceful, fulfilling life, with daily happiness from seeing the smiles of my husband and children. But as days passed, I started to feel troubled about our life. The kids grew quickly, and when Sean turned 5 and Anna 3, they started kindergarten. They got along well, but the problem was Jim's attitude. Initially, Jim showed equal love to both Sean and Anna, but as they grew, his behavior changed. Returning from the park, he would always wash hands with Anna first, serve her snacks first, and begin to favor her. At first, I thought it was trivial, but Jim's affection increasingly focused only on Anna. I wondered if it was because fathers naturally favor their daughters. But how could my gentle husband do that? Was there a reason? Despite my thoughts, I couldn't accept this change in his attitude and kept convincing myself it was just my imagination. However, the reality didn't change, and Jim's attitude towards Sean only worsened. His attention increasingly shifted to Anna. I thought, is it because Anna is his blood-related child? The thought alone brought me to tears. The difference in his attitude became more obvious. He would only hold hands, play, and cuddle with Anna. Seeing Sean watching them from a distance made me feel unbearable. I once asked Jim, "Hey, can you pay a bit more attention to Sean?" But he simply replied,
Of course, I do that, right?
Eventually, even when Sean tried to join into their conversation, Jim ignored him. Despite Sean's repeated attempts to get his attention, Jim finally snapped.
Quiet.
Seeing Sean's sad face, I lost it. Sean's been trying to get your attention for a while. Why ignore him? You can hear him. I confronted Jim, but Jim retorted,
What did I do wrong? It's Sean's fault for interrupting me and Anna. I want to talk to Anna. Don't bother us.
His attitude towards Sean got worse from there. Jim would visit his parents' house a few times a month, always on weekends when Sean had baseball practice. Sean, having developed an interest in baseball through playing catch with Jim, had joined a local team and was quite skilled. At first, I thought Jim's schedule overlapping with Sean's practice were coincidental, but as it happened repeatedly and Jim took only Anna to his parents, I started to suspect he was doing it intentionally. After a month of this, Jim came home one day and said,
I found this yesterday. Isn't it perfect for our cute Anna?
He handed Anna a branded dress. It was an ordinary day, not her birthday, Christmas, or anything like that. Jim handed the dress to Anna with a smile. It was an expensive gift. I wondered if there was nothing for Sean, but nothing was given to him. Sean just watched Jim and Anna's interaction. Anna happily reached for the dress Jim offered. She joyfully shouted, "Yay, pretty!" Concerned for Sean, I tried to distract him. "Sean, look, your favorite cartoon is on TV," I said. but he kept looking at the dress in Anna's hands. Ignoring Sean, Jim and Anna were in their own world.
This dress will definitely suit you, Anna. Let's wear it next time we go to Grandma's house.
Yes, I'll show it to Grandma. Thanks, Dad. Anger surged within me as Jim ignored Sean and talked happily with Anna. I couldn't stand Jim's behavior and was about to say something. That's when Sean dropped the bombshell.
Dad, is that the one you bought with Mrs. Lisa yesterday?
Mrs. Lisa, mentioned by my son, is a teacher at the kindergarten attended by our children. She's young, charming, and popular among the parents for her friendliness. I couldn't understand why she was being brought up in this context. As I pondered, my son, Sean, pressed on, asking his father, Jim. Right, Dad? It seemed Sean was sure about something. Jim, who had been responsive until then, suddenly became silent. I turned to look at him. His expression was frozen. His face was completely pale. For a moment, I was worried whether he was even breathing. Then Jim stuttered.
What are you talking about?
I watched him with a cold gaze as he blurted out a clumsy excuse.
I found this on my way home from work. Thought Anna might like it. I'll look for something Sean will like next time. What do you like, huh? Oh, it's time for my bath.
With that, he nervously retreated to his room. Unable to fully hide the situation, my distrust towards Jim grew. The next day, Jim went to work as usual, showing no sign of his previous nervousness. While giving snacks to the kids back from kindergarten, I probed. That's right, Anna. You must be happy with the dress from Dad yesterday. Sean, about what you said, what do you mean that your father bought it with Mrs. Lisa? Sean, munching on a cream puff, replied,
Oh, that. I heard it from Anna. She often meets Mrs. Lisa when he goes out.
What? Mrs. Lisa from kindergarten?
Yeah. You know her, right, Mom?
Yes, I know her, but... I casually asked, Oh, is it a coincidence? Why? Is it maybe because Mrs. Lisa lives nearby?
I don't know that, but Mrs. Lisa found the dress. Right, Anna?
Yeah, Mrs. Lisa said it was cute in the store. When Dad and I are out, Mrs. Lisa often comes there.
I see. Good that she found you a cute dress. Where did you meet her? Near Grandma's house?
No, we went there by car, to a place with lots of shops.
Anna, being only 3, couldn't explain well, but I could only think of one place with many shops, the newly built shopping center. Listening to the kids, I speculated. Perhaps Jim was meeting Mrs. Lisa at the shopping center, taking Anna along for a shopping date. If that were true, it was unforgivable. Not just the cheating, but using the kids as a cover for it was despicable. Jim had adored Sean before we had Anna, but his attitude changed blatantly after having his own child. This made me feel bad for him as well as a growing anger within me. Having gleaned this information from the kids, I decided to cool my head. Thinking about how to get back at Jim, I reached out to my friend from high school, Becky. She's been divorced twice, and she's a single mother, having gone through many tough situations. Becky promptly replied to my message. Oh, that's bad news. Definitely fishy. Her blunt message left me feeling like I had been thrown into the abyss, despite being prepared for it. She advised, First, observe your husband. Check the car navigation history if he goes out. Also, keep an eye on the other woman. Might be good to hire a private investigator. I'll recommend one. Hiring an investigator would cost money, but it's necessary. Following Becky's advice, I started with what I could do and checked the car navigation history, but found no record. I had never thought to check this before and assumed it was just how it worked. Becky later suggested that Jim might have deleted the history to hide evidence. Frustrated by how naive I've been and Jim's secretive behavior, I decided to check Mrs. Lisa's behavior at the kindergarten. She greeted the children with a warm smile as usual. Good morning. Thank you for today.
Morning, Kathy. Hello, Sean, Anna. Ready for a fun day? Let's play together. I'll take good care of you.
Despite our usual conversation, there was no change in her demeanor. The thought of her betraying me with a friendly smile was almost enough to make me distrust people altogether. I had already requested a private investigator who assured me,
We'll report any developments.
So, it was a waiting game. Jim, oblivious to my suspicions, continued to dote on Anna as usual. About 2 weeks later, the investigator contacted me.
We've caught him in the act.
The next day, an envelope from the investigator's office contained several photos, including one of Jim grinning with Lisa, caught in their carefree moments. The photos showed them being affectionate with each other. Struggling to breathe as I looked at them, I tried to calm my anger. Meanwhile, Jim was still clueless. That night, he casually mentioned,
I've got to go to my parents' house this weekend.
I feigned interest. Oh, really? Anything I can help with? Jim, slightly flustered, replied,
No, I've got it. You have Sean's baseball, right? I'll take Anna. Don't worry.
Holding back my swirling anger, I replied with a fake smile. Sure, give my regards to your mom. Jim, not anticipating what was coming, reassured me with a relaxed face.
Yep, got it. Don't worry.
He must have taken my smile as genuine kindness. Determined to do more than just present him with divorce papers, I steadily prepared for a plan to confront him this weekend. Unaware of everything, my husband Jim seemed excited as the weekend approached. And then the weekend came. I'm off to watch Sean's baseball game.
Alright, I'm taking Anna to visit my parents' house. Might be back late.
After this exchange, I was sure Jim was meeting Lisa today, given his overly cheerful tone. Pretending to be oblivious, I left the house with Sean before Jim. Before leaving, I had sneakily placed a small GPS tracker in Anna's backpack. Even if he erased the car navigation history, I could track where they went. While watching Sean's game, I kept checking the GPS on my smartphone. The tracker seemed to be working well. The GPS showed their movements. Instead of his parents' house, Jim and Anna arrived at a trendy park near the sea, likely to meet Lisa there. Just imagining that scene filled me with alternating waves of anger and revenge. As planned, I called my mother. I had already informed my parents about the evidence of the affair, so the conversation was quick. Hello, Mom. He just went out saying he's visiting his parents.
I've already checked with them. He's not there. Alright, proceed as planned.
Okay, thanks. After ending the call, I asked a mom friend to take Sean home and headed back myself. On my way, I received a message from my mom saying,
Everything's done as planned.
I had conspired with my parents and in-laws to make Jim confess. Once Jim said he was leaving for his parents, my mother-in-law called him saying, I'm nearby and would like to stop by your house. I won't see Sean, but I'd love to see Anna. I had already given them Jim's contact information. I couldn't be at home when my parents arrived, or the lie would be exposed. Receiving the call, Jim would rush home in a panic. We all planned to confront him there. By now, Jim would be hurrying back. Soon after I got home, both my parents and in-laws arrived. We showed them the photos of the affair sent by the detective. Both sets of parents sighed as they flipped through them.
Oh, shameful. Taking only Anna.
They repeated words like disgraceful and embarrassing as they looked at the photos. About an hour after we arrived, Jim came home flustered. Seeing his father's car, he must have panicked. He stormed into the room.
Mom, what's this sudden visit? Huh? Kathy's parents too. What's going on with everyone here?
Jim was clearly confused by the gathering of both families. My mother stood up, took Anna, who was beside a bewildered Jim, and went to another room. My father-in-law said in a stern voice,
Sit down.
The table was laid with photos of the affair. Jim, sweating profusely, finally understood the gravity of the situation and sat down. The confrontation with Jim lasted about an hour. After a thorough grilling from my father, the in-laws, and me, Jim was forcibly taken to his parents' house by his father. During the discussion, Jim kept making pathetic excuses like,
It was just a whim. I was going to stop.
Seeing my state of anger and sadness, my father-in-law assured me,
It must be unpleasant for you to be with him. We'll take him back. Don't worry.
Jim admitted to his affair with Lisa and apologized to me. He fell in love with Lisa's smile during kindergarten pickups and somehow got her contact details. It seemed the feelings were mutual, and they developed a romantic relationship after a while. Jim, adoring his biological daughter Anna, lied about her wanting to meet Lisa and started taking her to meet his mistress. Realizing Anna was fond of her, Jim began contemplating marrying Lisa, taking Anna along. He lied about visiting his parents just to introduce Anna to Lisa, and that's why he was always taking Anna with him. The dress he bought was found during one of their dates. He must not have expected Anna to tell Sean about it. When Jim bluntly stated he couldn't love Sean after Anna was born, I mercilessly presented him with divorce papers saying, "We don't need a father or a husband like you. Let's just get a divorce." Jim sat there, face wet with sweat and tears. He was taken in by his parents, allowing me to spend time back at home until the divorce was filed without stress. Eventually, we officially divorced. One day I noticed Lisa's name among the resignations in a newsletter from the kindergarten. According to rumors among the moms, she had relations with several fathers of the children. Known for liking handsome men, Jim wasn't her only partner. I heard a rumor that Lisa dumped Jim right after our divorce. She was caught dating another man by one of the kindergarten moms, and the photos spread through the parents' group chat, eventually reaching kindergarten. I was reminded of the power of parental networks. The kindergarten's notice cited that she resigned due to health issues, but it was clear she was fired. As for Jim, he had been commuting to work from his parents' place, but after the rumor of the divorce due to his affair spread throughout his company, he felt ostracized and requested a transfer. He's supposed to move to another region next month. I consulted with a lawyer and sued both Jim and Lisa for damages. Using our child for their affair allowed me to claim a substantial amount. I found a house that was up for rent, not too far from my parents, planning to move there when the kids start elementary school. I intended to enjoy a peaceful rural life there with the help from my parents. Back to being a single mother, I have no regrets. I've decided to raise my children calmly in the quiet countryside.
A useless person who doesn't work is a divorce waiting to happen. Where did the kind Michael, with his charming crinkly smile, go after our marriage? With his promotion came a transfer. It's a nationwide bank, so who knows when he'll be able to return here. That's why I quit my longtime job to follow him when he asked me to come along. Honestly, there's no point in being with such a person. Fine by me. I was overjoyed to finally get a divorce and, thinking of it as a good omen for the future, I bought a lottery ticket. Then, to my surprise, I won a huge amount. I've come to collect my $12 million. Just as I was about to reclaim a happy life with the $12 million, Michael caught wind of it. I had already seen through what he was up to. I can't forgive him for trying to take the money for himself and live his life exactly as he wants. I'm tired of him constantly belittling others, so I've decided to fight back. I am Sarah Johnson, a 35-year-old housewife. I used to work at the city office for about 10 years after graduating from high school. I thought my life would uneventfully continue as a city office employee until retirement. But everything changed since that time. I met my husband, Michael, at a restaurant near the city office. It's a fairly large restaurant with a diverse menu, often visited after meetings or completing significant tasks. That day, after finishing chairing a meeting, I went to the restaurant alone to treat myself to a nice lunch. What's recommended here, I wonder? There was a man in front of the store, puzzling over the menu. Indeed, with its extensive menu and colorful in-store pop-up signs. Many customers seem to have a hard time deciding what to eat. The man, tracing his finger over pop-ups saying #1 popular dish, recommended, and manager's pick, caught my attention in an unusual way. Normally, I would have ignored him, but something about him intrigued me. And I found myself speaking to him. If you're eating here, I like the chicken Napolitan. It's sweet and spicy, really tasty. Chicken Napolitan? Is that on the menu? Yes. The chicken and Napolitan ketchup blend together perfectly, it's really delicious. Then I guess I'll try that. His crinkly smile was so charming, I found myself captivated. At first, he seemed like a competent businessman, but his smile gave him a boyish appearance. Hey, that strap keychain you have, is that? Oh, this? I got into it because of my sister and even went to their concert recently. That's the concert of that band, right? I went too. It was amazing. Discovering we liked the same artist, we hit it off and unexpectedly ended up having lunch together. It was a familiar place, lunchtime, and above all, the conversation was enjoyable, even if it was brief. I felt a sense of fulfillment that our lunch break conversation wasn't enough. It seemed Michael felt the same way, as he approached me when we were leaving. If you don't mind, I'd like to meet like this again. Could we exchange contact information? My usual day at the usual place had taken an unexpected turn. Is this kind of dramatic encounter even real? Despite my doubts, we exchanged contact details. I wanted to talk more with him, and it was exciting to share such enthusiasm together. Afterwards, we started spending more time together, going out for meals, and attending events. Naturally drawn to each other, we started dating and eventually got married. We got married when I was 33 and Michael was 34. I was cherishing the happiness of spending my life with Michael. But things didn't go as smoothly as I hoped. Sarah, I need to talk to you about something. Michael came home with a troubled look on his face. What's wrong with that face? Come on, let's eat dinner quickly. I've been transferred. I thought I should tell Sarah as soon as possible. I couldn't quite grasp this sudden news. Transferred? What do you mean by that? They said I should go out and see the world as part of my promotion. And it's kind of non-negotiable. I was surprised, but half of my mind thought it couldn't be helped. After all, Michael is a banker, and the bank he works at has many branches around here. So a transfer seemed inevitable. I was somewhat prepared for a transfer, but what struck me was Michael's words and expression. Would a normal transfer make him look this gloomy? Wait a minute. What do you mean by the outside world? And is there something difficult for you to say? Actually, the transfer is to New York. They told me to go there and train at one of the branches. What? So suddenly. I knew you might be transferred since you're a banker, but to New York. Of all places. We lived in a provincial city, and New York was quite a distance away. We had discussed what would happen if he was transferred before we got married. And I had told him I wanted him to go alone if that happened. However, Michael was about to break that promise. Please, Sarah. I want you to come with me. Wait a minute. I have a job too. I know it's difficult, but I just can't bear to be apart from you. You want me to quit my job and follow you to New York. But what if you're transferred back to a branch here in a few years? Why not go to New York? Alone for the time being? Then, Michael reluctantly answered. I thought about that too. But our bank has branches all over the country. And there's no guarantee I'll be transferred back to this region. That's so sudden. I don't know what to say. Besides, being transferred to New York means I'm on the path to promotion. It'll allow me to provide a better life for you. Then, Michael clasped his hands together as if praying and pleaded with me. I know it's a lot to ask you to quit your job suddenly. But I hate the idea of going alone. I'm serious about advancing in my career. So please come with me. After such a plea, I couldn't refuse. Honestly, if Michael went to his new post alone, I didn't know what would happen to our life. Besides, we'd been talking about wanting children as soon as possible. So living separately seemed unrealistic. Okay, I'll follow you. But you have to work hard in return, alright? Thank you. I'll work my hardest. I'll become a branch manager in the future and make life easier for you. I wish I could tell myself back then not to follow him. In New York, Michael seemed like a changed man. Maybe he became a workaholic, or perhaps it was something else, but his smile had vanished.
Ah.
Welcome home. Ready for dinner? Huh? How can I eat when I'm this tired? With a lifeless expression, he staggered to the bedroom, exhausted. Mornings were early, and our days began without even a good morning. Michael, you look pale. Are you okay? I haven't seen his crinkly smile in a while. We hardly ever eat together, and he usually comes home after midnight. I heard weekends were generally his days off, but he's rarely at home. Even when he is, he stays shut in the bedroom. It's almost like living alone.
Ah.
Maybe I should have insisted on him going alone. Was there even a point in quitting my job to follow him to New York? But no matter how much I talk to myself, it's too late for regrets. I need to find something to do for myself. It's a waste to just spend my days aimlessly. Then one day, I had an idea when I saw a flyer in my mailbox. Since I was always at home, I thought about starting some work and applied to a nearby cafe that was hiring. They were desperately short-staffed and hired me immediately. For me, who had only ever done office work, everything at the cafe was new and exciting. And above all, seeing the customers' smiles made me happy. The cafe I worked at was famous for its latte art, and customers visited daily specifically to see the owner's art. I thought how fun it would be if I could make such beautiful latte art too. Working at this cafe in New York, I found a new joy. In my free time, I learned latte art from the manager and spent fulfilling days. Gradually, I started to dream of making latte art part of my career. That's when I began to vaguely think about starting my own business. Having my own shop and spreading the joy of latte art would be so much fun. I used these daydreams to escape from the reality of drifting apart from Michael. Eventually, what started as escapism became a solid goal, and I began to research how to own my own shop. But that wasn't all. Maybe I'll try my luck. I also started buying lottery tickets as a way to test my fortune. Working at the cafe was fun, and it provided me with some personal income. I thought it was killing two birds with one stone, but Michael didn't seem to approve. One day, while I was practicing latte art on my day off, Michael spoke to me in a displeased tone. "Hey, what's with you lately, Sarah?" "What do you mean? Is there something odd going on?" "No, you're always out having fun, neglecting the housework. There's dust accumulating, and meals aren't prepared." Of course, I have been doing what I should, on top of working part-time and practicing latte art. I used to prepare breakfast and dinner for Michael. However, as Michael started coming home late at night and often left in the morning without eating, I stopped cooking recently. "You haven't been eating at home lately, Michael." "That's not the point, is it?" "What are you saying? Are you making excuses for not wanting to do it?" He wasn't the kind of person to speak so aggressively before, but he seems to have changed after being transferred to New York. "And about this cafe or latte art, whatever it is, aren't you embarrassed to be playing around like that as a banker's wife? And talking about wanting kids but not even cooking properly, isn't that failing as a wife?" In fact, I've been going to the hospital in between my part-time work. And it seems the issue isn't with me. Please don't say I'm playing around. "And about the child. There's no issue with me, so the doctor said to bring you next time." "When can you go, Michael?" Then Michael suddenly started yelling and raised his hand in anger. "What's that supposed to mean? Are you saying it's my fault?" "Nobody's saying that. I was just asking when you could come to the doctor with me, that's all. I've told you I'm busy with work. How many times do you need to hear it? I'm not like you, playing around with coffee all day, don't lump me in with that. I was shocked to hear him say such things. Where had Michael with the crinkly smile gone? Since coming to New York, he seemed like a completely different person.
Ugh.
I really can't stand this. I'm going to work. Wait, isn't it your day off today? And it's already evening. I've got some unfinished business. It's none of your business, all right? He left, but it didn't look like he was dressed for work. He was in casual clothes and sprayed himself with cologne 2 or 3 times before leaving. Hey, have you always worn cologne? My casual question was met with a glare from Michael and then ignored. His frequent sudden departures from home, claiming it was work, and his increasingly irritable behavior were pushing me to my limits. Honestly, I want to build a good relationship with Michael. Living in an unfamiliar place, he's my only family, and I want us to support and help each other. But I had noticed that the way Michael looked at me had changed significantly from before. It's time for a proper conversation. If he's dissatisfied with me, I want to know so I can make changes. Hey, can we talk for a minute? Good timing. I have something to talk about too. Michael saying he had something serious to talk about was unusual. I sat down in a living room chair, pondering what it could be. Sitting opposite Michael in these chairs, I wonder when was the last time we did this. We haven't really faced each other properly recently. So, what did you want to talk about? You must know what I'm talking about, right? What do you mean? You're so clueless. That's why you can't get a proper job. I could overlook Michael criticizing me for now, but I couldn't stand him belittling the job I love. Whether you respect my job or not, it's wrong to mock someone's work, especially when they do it with passion. Despite my initial resistance to moving and living in a new place, I found a passion for latte art here and dreamed of making it the foundation of my life. It felt like Michael had callously tainted that dream. There's no justification for mocking the dream I found for myself, to own a shop and make latte art my profession. Huh? Work? Calling that kind of playtime a job is even more embarrassing. It's like playing house, it doesn't count as a real job. Enough already. What are you trying to say? Then, with a smirk, Michael started waving a piece of paper. A useless person who doesn't work is a divorce waiting to happen. Saying that, he handed me a divorce paper. Divorce papers? Yes. You don't work and just live off your husband. You should recognize the difference in our positions. I see, so that's the kind of person you are. I'm busy with work, and I don't have the luxury to support a parasite. Does he think I'll cling to him, not wanting a divorce? He handed over the divorce papers and stood there, smirking at me. He's probably not amused that I'm just staring at the divorce papers. His tone is becoming more irritated. You don't want to divorce, right? A high school graduate who doesn't work properly can't possibly find a job now. What should I do with this, I wonder? Hurry up. This slowness is exactly why you can't work properly. He wants to divorce as soon as possible, that desire is clear. Michael is full of impatience, embarrassingly starting to fidget. The face glaring at me while fidgeting is not the Michael I once loved. Why did I fall for such a person, and why did I come to such a far place without knowing anyone? It's all too late now. There's only one thing to do now. Facing my provocative husband, I brightly responded. Okay, I agree. Really? Remember, you can't change your mind later. I wouldn't do that. You brought this paper because you want a divorce, right? I'm done being afraid and walking on eggshells around Michael's moods. Smiling, I took the divorce papers and told him. And about this divorce paper, I'll file it myself. You better actually file it. I'll know if you do anything strange. Stop it already. When I say I'll do something, I do it. Don't worry. After filing the divorce papers and becoming free, I decided to check the results of a lottery ticket to see what my future holds. I went to the familiar lottery ticket booth, where the usual lady was working. While chatting, I handed her my ticket. She scanned it and suddenly disappeared with a strange noise. Wondering what happened, it seemed she fell off her chair. I was startled, but then I saw unbelievable numbers on the small display. Along with it, congratulations. 1, 10, 100, 12 million. I was so shocked, I couldn't speak. This was a great restart. With this amount of money, my dream of owning my shop feels much closer. I went to the bank where my ex-husband works to cash in the ticket. It wasn't for any particular reason, just that his bank was nearby. Little did I know that visiting this bank would significantly change things for me. Carrying such a large sum was honestly scary. So I rushed to the bank just before closing to cash it in. While waiting after being served, a woman approached me with a smirk. "What brings you here, going out of your way like this?" I thought it was quite a rude way for a bank employee to speak. "No, nothing much really. Thanks for going out of your way to come here." Out of my way. What's with you since a while ago? Anyway, please take care of this. Oh, nothing. What is this, may I ask? Ruby looked puzzled at the lottery ticket I was holding. "I'm here for cashing it in today." Cashing in? I can't believe you bought a lottery ticket. Using your husband's hard-earned money to buy lottery tickets, what a luxury. The bank was crowded, so Ruby's rude words were only audible up close. People just passed by without noticing anything unusual. I couldn't believe there was such a rude bank employee, but I decided to just get things done quickly. "I've come to collect my $12 million. At this, Ruby's smirking expression changed abruptly, and she stared at me. The $12 million. Her sudden loud voice startled me. Then, without a word of excuse, she retreated into a back room. I was led to the manager's office due to the large amount of the prize. The procedure to receive the $12 million went smoothly. But I was still bothered by that extremely rude bank employee. Her way of looking at me as if sizing me up made me feel uncomfortable. I opened my laptop as soon as I got home. I remembered that the bank, where Michael worked, a national-scale bank, had blogs for each branch to post daily happenings and promotions. There must be something that could give me a hint about that rude woman. While browsing the blog, I managed to find out the name of that rude bank employee. Knowing her name would be advantageous. While I was researching the woman, I received a message. It was from Michael, asking if we could meet tonight. Honestly, there's no need to meet him now that we're divorced and practically strangers. But I decided to indulge him this once. Knowing Michael's pride, I thought it must be a great humiliation for him to contact me. His message was full of condescension. "I thought I'd meet you since you must be feeling lonely. And I contacted you thinking you might be struggling living alone." How unnecessary. Though internally boiling with anger, I wanted to put an end to this. So I agreed to meet at a cafe. When we met, Michael immediately started speaking. "Hey, why don't we start over? I've been thinking a lot since then." Start over?
Yeah.
Back then, I was hot-headed and said things I didn't mean. "So, you want to meet and start over?" Michael looked intently at me and continued. "Right. We had a little misunderstanding. But if we start over, I believe we can be a good couple." Staring at Michael, who seemed to be intoxicated with his own words, I decided to put an end to it. "If you insist, we can think about starting over." "Really? That's why you're the one, Sarah." "Did you really think I'd say that?" Michael looked at me in confusion, so I decided to enlighten him. "Unfortunately, I'm glad we divorced. And the reason you want to restart is for the money, right?" "Money? What are you talking about? No use playing dumb. You thought you could have it all to yourself, right? Then Michael leaned forward abruptly across the table, appealing to me. No, I wouldn't use it all by myself. Besides, with $12 million, we could even buy our own house. And it would be perfect for a fresh start, right? I never said anything about $12 million. Realizing his mistake, Michael hurriedly covered his mouth, but it was too late. He had already let the cat out of the bag, and now trying to cover up was futile. The tongue is the source of misfortune, as the saying goes. And it perfectly applies to my ex-husband. You cheated on me during your transfer. Made a fuss about divorce because I became a nuisance. And now you want to remarry for money? Don't make me laugh. No, it's not about the money, it's just that. Do you even realize what you are doing or saying? Michael looked uncomfortable and restless. You heard about the money from that woman Ruby, didn't you? What? What are you talking about? I know you're dating her. You thought if we got back together, you could buy her more gifts. Michael was sweating profusely despite the cold weather. That's not true. You thought you could fool me with some random story? I showed Michael a photo I had with me. I thought something was off, so when I went to the bank, I kept an eye on what was going on inside. Then this very rude woman approached me. I thought she lacked manners, but turns out she's your girlfriend, huh? The photo I had was of Michael and Ruby standing together. They were too close to be just colleagues, more like a couple. It would be hard to pass it off as just a workplace relationship. If he was still trying to deny it, he should think again. The cafe where I work turns into a bar at night. I heard from the owner and my coworkers that you two were seen there on a date. I had my suspicions, but I never thought it was true. No, it's just that. I heard from the owner that you've been visiting the cafe at night for about 2 years now. Michael was trembling, holding the photo. Maybe he's worried about being seen. So, you were busy cheating while I was working part-time during the day. Planning to leave me and be together with the younger and prettier Ruby, right? Michael had no words to say, just looked down. But then, you changed your mind when I won the lottery. Especially after hearing it was a large amount. Michael looked at me as if struck by the truth. You thought if we got back together, you could leech off me as your wife, right? Yes, that's right. Money is a shared property in a marriage, isn't it? We've been living together for years, and if we're going to live together again, it's definitely shared property. But wait, are you serious with what you're saying? I sighed at Michael's words. He presented the divorce papers himself and now talks as if we're getting back together. Indeed, I have a lottery ticket, and it just so happens to be a big win. But I bought it after we divorced, after the divorce papers were submitted. What? What does that mean? Be clear. It means it's not subject to property division. I've already confirmed this with a lawyer. Michael looked at me with a bitter expression. You thought you could just casually come back to live with me once my finances improved, right? I never said anything like that. No, but that's the reality, isn't it? I overheard it. I operated my smartphone. What came out was an audio recording. Amidst the background noise, a conversation could be heard. The recording was of Michael and Ruby discussing how they could benefit from the $12 million I won. The conversation included their plans for using the money to buy a house and start a business. Ruby's excited voice was particularly noticeable. Is this from the bar? How do you have this recording? It seems the conversation got recorded accidentally while I was recording a video. Michael's face alternated between pale and flushed. So, you plan to take my $12 million and enjoy it with your mistress, right? It's unfair that you're the only one benefiting. I can't accept that, You're playing around at the cafe and then hit the jackpot. And you can't even forgive 1 or 2 affairs of mine. From my point of view, you're the one who's messed up. I couldn't understand how my part-time job and his affair could be compared. But I decided to let it slide. The important thing was the fact of the matter. This branch is where one of our wedding guests, your senior, works, right? It's a small world. So what if my senior works there? It's none of your business. I showed them the video because they wanted to see it. They're interested in flair bartending. Oh, and it was the video of your conversation, by the way. Michael suddenly stood up so forcefully that his chair toppled over with a loud noise. Hey, what are you thinking, showing that to my senior? They said they wanted to see it, so I thought why not? What are you doing to me? Michael slumped down, holding his head in his hands. Indeed, it makes sense. One of Michael's seniors who attended our wedding was rumored to become a branch manager. Being noticed by the senior means instantly veering off the promotion track. Everything I've built up, and now known by the senior of all people. You thought it'd be fine as long as you weren't caught, right? Well, that's not how it works. Ultimately, Michael fell from his career path and now reportedly spends his days as a counter staff, constantly dealing with paper shredding. Overtaken by his juniors and treated as a nuisance at the bank, his situation is his own doing. He chose this path and should accept the consequences. Ruby was called up and told that resignation was her only option, despite her insistence on not wanting to resign. Once her affair was publicly known, resignation was the only choice. She eventually resigned. Ruby was apparently incompetent at work, unable to understand instructions and doing sloppy work. She's registered with a temp agency but not working. Post-divorce, they blame each other, hurling insults. I think it's not just because of the affair, but also due to not taking proper care of each other. I continued practicing latte art and decided to go independent. Contemplating my future, the cafe owner and my coworkers, including part-timers, were incredibly supportive, allowing me to open my cafe as goodwill. After graduating high school, I monotonously worked at the city office. But following Michael on his transfer and discovering the fascinating world of latte art was a stroke of luck. If I had stayed at the city office while Michael transferred alone, I likely would have never encountered latte art. There were uncertain nights, but thanks to word of mouth and magazine features, customer traffic has been steady. I never dreamed of owning my own shop, showing how unpredictable life can be. That's what makes life interesting. I'm overjoyed by the simple happiness of enriching my days with what I love.